Hi, Rachel.
Hi.
So today we are talking about, for lack of a better word, we're talking about book boyfriends. So if you don't know what that is, it's if you are a reader and you happen to read a book with a certain fictional man that you kind of have a little crush on. It doesn't matter. I know he's not real, but you can still have a little crush on these fictional men.
Real in your heart, guys.
Yes, exactly. Real in your heart. So we're talking about our favorite book boyfriends today, what we like about them, and we could go on forever, but we're going to keep it simple. It's going to be our favorite book boyfriends, what we like about them, because we could go into movie boyfriends and heroes that we're writing personally. We're not going to do that today. It's going to be very focused, like my word of the new year.
We'll see. We might get into a few tangents, but we'll control ourselves.
So do you want to go first, Rachel?
Oh, okay.
Who's your first one? Pick just one.
Okay. I'm trying to think if I should go with my top favorite or if I should. I'll leave him for last, actually. Okay. So the first one actually that came to my mind, other than my top favorite, I don't know if you've read Art of Victory.
No.
It's a Regency romance.
Oh.
It's so good. It's so good. And one of my top, and I actually read it this summer, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And the main male character's name is Duke. He is one of my top 5 favorite book boyfriends now. And he's a recent read, so that's pretty high praise that he beat out everybody I've ever read. For anybody out there who's read that book, please let us know if you agree whether or not you also enjoyed that particular book boyfriend, because he's awesome. And if you don't know anything about that book, essentially there is the main character, and she's trying to convince her best friend's uncle to allow her to marry the man of her dreams. And the uncle, Duke, is slightly cantankerous and very stubborn, and is like, no, I'm not going to let her do that because I think she's going to ruin her life. So anyway, the main character spends the entire book trying to convince him to let her best friend marry this guy. And it's just kind of funny because the main character, she's obsessed with the art of war. And so she views this relationship between her and the guy like, I am going to win this battle kind of thing. And the whole time the guy, my favorite part about him probably is the fact that from the get-go, he's all in on her and she doesn't really realize it. She views it as I'm trying to win this battle. And he's like, no, I'm just trying to convince you to love me. And I just love that. I'm like, I love it when the guy falls first. And when he can't be swayed from loving the girl, he's like, no, I'm just gonna be patient and wait until I can convince you to love me back. I'm just like, you have my heart forever. And just the banter, because she's very very spirited and hard-headed and very stubborn. She reminds me very much of myself. She's a handful and a half, and the guy is just he loves it. He's like, I don't need you to change. He's like, you're a lot, but I love that. And it takes her a while to understand that she doesn't need to change for him. He's just loves her the way she is. But I think after writing this list, it's very clear to me that I have a type. They're all very similar. And I was like, I love that he's not this necessarily strong silent type, but he's very easygoing, and a lot more of he looks very intimidating, and he comes across as the broody kind of guy. But I think partially too the fact that he falls for her so hard, and he's just like, nope, I'm just gonna wait you out. I'm just like, I love that. I love that so much. So yeah, he's definitely on my top 5 favorite list. Loved him.
Okay.
What's your first?
So, I think I'm going to go with the most recent read. And actually, I have to preface this. This taught me that I'm just not a book boyfriend person. And maybe more so when I was young. Yeah. And I was trying to figure out why. And then I was like, I think it might be because, so when I read a book, and I can really love the romance, I think the romance is really well done. I believe in it. I love the hero. I think he's an amazing guy. But for me, it's I have a hard time having a crush. And when we say book boyfriend, I mean, I know it's not a serious crush, but I just don't that's the heroine's man. That's her man. And it's I read 300 pages in her head, we're besties, we're sisters. So it's like I can't be attracted. Like even if I really like the romance and I like the hero, it's like I can't be attracted to her man.
Oh
Like
my gosh.
it's
You're like, I'm a loyal friend. I will not have a crush on your love interest. That's awesome.
yeah. So, but that being said, I did come up with a few. And when I was younger, I think it was easier because, you know, when you're younger, when you're like 12, like you're not actually having, like, you're not going on dates. Like, there's no romance happening in your life. So it's more visceral, like the whole book boyfriend thing. Is when you get older and like you actually start going on dates with like real men and stuff. Like I feel like for me at least it lost something. I know there's like happily married women who still have like crazy crushes, and that's fine. It's just like for me it just kind of lost something after you know I got older. But I will say one hero I absolutely love. So this is from one of my new favorite books. It's called Feathers of Snow by Ivinya, and she's another indie author. So look up her book. I highly recommend it. It is a Goose Girl retelling. So basically the premise is, if you don't know the Goose Girl, a princess is traveling to a foreign kingdom to meet the prince that she's going to marry. And in the original fairy tale, the maid at one point like gets her alone. I think she's like helping her to get dressed or whatever, and she like threatens her, and she's like, you have to switch places with me, if not like I'll kill you, like I'm gonna be the princess and you're gonna be the maid. And then like she gets to the kingdom, and then she tells the prince that, oh, this maid was horrible, she tried to kill me. And then so the prince like banishes the maid and she has to become a goose girl. So that's the original fairy tale. So this is like a retelling of that, and it's a little bit different because the heroine in this case is actually the maid, and the princess doesn't want to go, so she sends the maid in her place to like this foreign kingdom. And so she goes to the kingdom and she meets her betrothed, and her betrothed, like I don't know, I think I'm like really picky with my heroes, and maybe like what's popular right now is like not what I'm into. So his name is Prince Gion. I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but it's kind of how it's spelled. So his name is Prince Gion, and they live in like this remote northern kingdom, and it's like a very like military kingdom. So he's like a soldier, and I definitely have a type. It's like soldiers. It could have something to do with the fact that like my dad was in the Air Force and I grew up around the military. I'm not sure. It probably does. That's probably exactly what it is. But so he's like a soldier, and he's the prince, and he's like in charge of like, you know, like protecting the kingdom. They have like all these like external forts to protect the kingdom from like these monsters. And they have like the best like slow burn romance, because like obviously they're betrothed, but they don't know each other, let alone like each other or love each other. And he's just like, he's like so, because he's like a military hero, so he's like so honorable and like kind of like closed off, you know. It's like that whole trope of like the really like closed off, like honorable, like strong, silent, you know, man. And he always does the right thing, but he's not necessarily very emotional. He's more like practical, you know. So I really loved him. Like that was the first time in a long time that I actually really liked a YA fantasy hero. Because like normally they're like, I don't know, well, I'm older now, so like they're young, so they're just not that attractive to me anymore. A lot of times they're like the bad boy. Like I love like Stephanie Garber and like the Caraval series, but like I'm not really like into any of the guys in it. I like the girls and I like the world and the plot, but like, you know, like the guys, like pretty much any like of the like the popular like books I've read recently with like, you know, the book boyfriends, like I'm just not really into them. Like they're good, they're okay, but
no, I totally agree.
Yeah, Prince Gion, definitely like check him out. It's Feathers of Snow. I feel like I always get like the preposition wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's Feathers of Snow. It's Ivinya. If you look up her, like you can't go wrong. And we can always include these books in like our show notes. Which we will definitely do for you guys.
Yes, because you should meet all of these men immediately. I will say that sounds very attractive to me, because the whole like I think also like the guy who has like just a little bit of like emotional baggage, so it's hard for him to open up and all that kind of like that's just like crack to me. I'm like, oh, you sweet little baby, come over here, I'll give you a hug.
Yes. Well, I think it goes along with the whole. I read a great analogy about romance from a romance author, and I can't even remember who it was, but it was like in an essays about like romance novels. And she said that the romance novel is the grown-up version of the horse girl novel. And she said the reason is the hero has to be the antagonist and, you know, the hero at the same time, because the antagonist being like not the villain, you know, the antagonist being this is the thing that the heroine has to conquer. And the reason why people are attracted to like either bad boy or like closed off or whatever is because in the horse girl books you have like a wild stallion and no man can like break or tame this stallion. But the girl has a different approach. She doesn't try and chain him up. She doesn't try and break him. She's gentle and soft, and the horse responds to that. So she doesn't untame, you know, she doesn't tame him and get rid of his wildness. But she earns his trust by being soft and gentle. So like he still is like that wild stallion, and he can be crazy like if somebody doesn't like him or whatever, or is trying to like hurt him. But for the girl, like he changes and he's soft and docile with her. And it's the same. And there's different tropes. I know like people are maybe not so much into this trope anymore, but for me, I really love the traditional romance story where like the hero is like this really like he's like bad or like he's hurt or whatever, and he's like this really alpha guy. But and she does not try and change him or break him or whatever. She lets him have that freedom and that like, you know, like top dog alpha. Like she doesn't try and change that. But like the way she goes about it, you know, she's gentle and she's this and she's that, and she just kind of like softens him. And like he like, you know, it's the same. It's like the same thing. And once I read that essay, I was like, oh my gosh, like life changing. That it really is like such like a pairing like that.
I had never heard that comparison before, but that makes so much sense, because either way, even if you're into like the bad guy, it's usually the bad guy who hates everyone but the one girl who's like, I will burn the whole world down just for this one girl. Or it's the like strong silent guy who's like super broody and doesn't open up to anybody except for the one girl.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's like none of these men can ever get him to do anything he doesn't want to do. Like he's a fighter. But, like for the girl, he's like, oh my gosh, she wants this, of course. Like
exactly. Yes.
You know, but like she didn't try and do it by trying to dominate him. Like, and I think like that's the key difference is like she did not do that. He's doing it because he chooses.
Because he loves her. Yeah. That makes so much sense. I had never heard that before, but that explains so much why I like the same types of characters over and over again. Yeah.
And I think most women do. I mean, like some women like different things, but I feel like most women generally like the strong silent type, like the alpha hero, the this and that, because like there's just something so satisfying, and it's pretty realistic too. I mean, in real life, like kind of follows that same pattern too. Like if you're like really, because I was in a relationship before and I was like really pushy in it and like really controlling, and it just didn't work out well. Whereas like now, you know, I'm kind of like, okay, like he's the man, like I'll just let him like make the decisions. I don't push him, I don't nag him, and it's just like, you know, it just works better because like nobody wants to be pushed or nagged, you know, like even women, like that doesn't work. Like, you know?
And I feel like when there's like genuine love between two people, then you both want to do what pleases the other person anyway. So nobody needs to be like pushed around, because it's like, well, I'll just do it because you like that's what makes you happy. Kind of thing. So
I feel like it's just super relatable for everybody.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. So interesting how we view book boyfriends differently and stuff. I think for me, I think when I was younger, I always wanted to see myself in whatever main character I was reading at the time. And I always felt like at that point in time, the main characters were either like really, really sweet and easygoing and like I guess more on like the quiet side, and not very argumentative at all. Or you had like the really, really powerhouse MCs where it's like they're gonna do everything themselves and they're like super boss fighters and everything. And I'm like, I don't fit into either of these categories. And so I feel like my thing was that I would always try to like fit myself into whatever the main character was and like find parts of myself in that main character. So then I always like really liked whatever guy they were into.
Yeah.
If that character's personalities, I liked that guy, then I was like, oh, well, I'm totally like in love with this guy. Because in my head, I was trying to make myself the main character in whatever way I could.
Yeah.
Which now I feel like there's a bigger variety now of personalities in main characters than there used to be, which is really nice. So for me, I'm like, yes, like I fall hard for the main character's guy. I'm like, marry me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that is the difference because I was thinking about it and I was like, I feel like a lot of people when they read, they put themselves in like the main character's shoes, which I'm sure I do to some extent, but maybe for me, it's a little bit more like, oh, this person is my friend. You know, because because if you are in the main character's shoes, of course you're gonna feel everything they feel. And so when they're in love with this guy, like you will be too, you know?
Yeah.
So I wonder if there's just like a difference to how I read. You know, I don't know.
I don't
Interesting
know.
to think about.
I know. I didn't know that readers could be like so diverse just in the way that we read the book.
Yeah.
It's so strange. Okay. Number 2. Okay. The next one, I don't know if you know who Shari L. Tapscott is. If you've ever read anything of hers. She's one of my favorites. Actually, I took a break from reading for like, 7 years, and I didn't read like at all. Because I had been reading a bunch of romance books, like Christian romance as a young adult, and then I just came up to book after book after book that had, like, I was getting bombarded with like different kinds of intimate scenes that I didn't know I was going to read, and I was like, well, I'm just going to stop reading because I don't know what anybody's doing anymore, and I feel like I couldn't find anything, and so I just stopped. And then I finally was like, well, I really want to read again, so I went on Amazon, and that's when I found independent authors. I had never read an independent author before in my life. And I found W.R. Gengel, and I read her book, and then I read Shari L. Tapscott next. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm finding books that actually fit the things that I want to read. So that was really cool. But one of the series that Shari L. Tapscott writes, which is one of the first series I read after taking like a 7-year break, is called the Elton Timber series. And it's like a series of standalone books, and each book is about a different guy and a different girl set in the same world, and they all know each other. Like the first book kind of introduces all of the characters, and then after that each book is about every one of those characters like going on their own journey. And my favorite is the second to last book. I think it's called Elodie of the Sea is what it's called. And I love the guy in that book. Some people might think he's boring, but to me I was just like, yes, this is the perfect balance, because I like the strong silent type guy, but I also feel like sometimes they're so extreme in their stoicism. But I like the ones that are a little bit more middle ground, and that's what this one was. And it's the story about this guy named Bran who he's becoming king, and he doesn't want to be king because he used to be captaining on a ship out at sea, and so now he's not going to be able to go on voyages anymore. And one day he's walking on the beach because he's kind of taking this short sabbatical by himself before he has to take over. And he finds this woman like washed up on the shore. And so the story is about him. His family is like bringing all these different princesses into the kingdom to try and like get him to get married. And meanwhile, he's dealing with this girl who has amnesia and can't remember where she's from. And it's kind of a little bit of a retelling on The Little Mermaid. And like she doesn't know where she's from or who she is. But she's wearing this ring, so they think she's married, but they're not sure because she can't remember. And so through the course of the story, they're trying to figure out who she is, where she's from, what's going on. And meanwhile, he's having all these women paraded in front of him, but all he wants is Elodie. And he's like, but I'm not sure if I can really have her or not. And what I love so much about Bran is that he's kind of like, he's more on the quiet side, like especially like in a group of people. But he's very sweet and earnest. And he's like, I think my favorite thing is that through the course of the story, even though these girls get paraded in front of him, he never gets distracted or confused. Like the whole time, he's like, I really want this one girl. I just don't know how to make it happen. but never is there the conflict of, oh, he starts to fall for somebody else, or that. I hate that trope when, you know, you bring that third party in and they start to fall for the wrong person. I just get so frustrated. So I love that he never gets distracted. He's like, he always wants the same girl. He's just trying to figure out how to get that one girl. And she's a little bit more on the fiery side, and he's a little bit on the softer side, which, again, I have a type, and it's very clear to me. But I just loved him because he wasn't like, because there was an earlier book in that series, the first book, where the main character, the guy, was very, very stoic and very like a man of few words kind of thing. And Bran is more like a little bit on the goofier side, but he's still that more quiet, easygoing personality, which I really liked. So, yeah.
Oh, now I want to read all these books. Like, I'm gonna get
They're so good. Because they have like little adventures in them. A lot of them do, like, you know, they're traveling from kingdom to kingdom. But I love a series. I swear. But it has to be a really good series, and the cliffhangers can't make me angry.
Yeah.
Because otherwise I'm like, forget this. I'm not reading this, especially if I have to wait. So I do like a good standalone because you get that resolution right there and you don't have to wonder. But I like that also there's a series. It's telling the story of the different people. So each book has its own happy ending, which is really nice.
Yeah. Yeah, I love when romance like series do that. Although this one sounds like it's like fantasy and romance, which is like I really love that. Like when it's like both. But like I read when I was really young, like I was a teenager, I read like the Bridgerton series, which now I'm like, was that inappropriate? I can't even remember. If it was,
it didn't make an impact, so hey.
Yeah. I was like, I don't know, 14, and my mom had them on her bookshelf, and so I was just like, oh, I'm gonna read these. And because I think it's like the siblings, so it's like each book is like, so that's a little more interconnected, but like it's so nice when, like, I don't know, you're reading book 3 and like they meet like the couple from like book 1 and they have a baby and like you get to like meet the baby and like kind of see like, you know, it's always kind of fun.
Yeah, and that's what this one does too, is at the end, is it the final book? I think it's both final books. You see like all the couples from the previous books and their kids and everything and all this stuff, and it's like, oh, I remember you guys.
Yeah. So I came up with like 5 technically book boyfriends, but my next one has like 3 of them in one. We might not have the back and forth going the whole time because I'll probably just do it like. But okay, so this series is called Flambards. And most people don't really know this series. It was published in the 60s. And the reason I bring it up is, so I read it when I was younger, so I was more into the whole book boyfriend thing. I wouldn't even say I'm like really attracted to all the guys, but it's just like the quintessential like book boyfriend series, and it has horses in it. So it's like,
there you go.
Like the ultimate girl series. So it was published in the 1960s, and apparently a lot of moms were a little upset with it because like it was really popular with girls, and a lot of moms thought it was too scandalous at the time. Like nothing, like there's nothing like scandalous by this day and age, you know, standards in it. You know, like the main character elopes at one point, but there is nothing sexual in these books at all. Like, I mean, there is no fade to black. It is because like a little girl could read it, but I guess the mother is objected to the fact that, because these are probably like 12-year-olds, you know, reading about like an adult character later on in the series. You know, she's eloping, she gets married, all this stuff. So like it starts out when the girl is 12 or 13, but it goes all the way up until like she's 21 and she gets married, and it goes on from there.
Oh, okay.
So there might be, I'll give you the synopsis, and then like at a certain point I'll say like when there's going to be spoilers. So if you do plan on reading this series, you can, you know,
read it for a second.
But so anyway, so it's about this girl, and she's an orphan, and it's set in like right before World War I in England. So she's an orphan, and she gets sent to live with her uncle and her 2 cousins, Mark and William, in the countryside. And she's like 13 or so. And the reason she hasn't come to live with them earlier is because her parents left her with a lot of money. And so this uncle, his estate is falling down. And so he's like, okay, well, if I have her come when she's older, one of my sons might marry her and we can get all this money so we can fix our estate. So he doesn't have her come to live with them until she's like 12 or 13 because he didn't want them growing up together because he's like, oh, they might not get married. You know. She comes to live with them, and it is just like this trifecta because we have the older brother, and the older brother really loves hunting and horses and dogs. And, like, he's all sporty, so he's like the jock. And then the younger brother hates everything to do with it, and he's like more like science nerdy, and he's really into airplanes, which are first coming out. So like right away, like we've got these two brothers, and then they have this stable hand whose name, so it's like Mark Will, and then the stable hand is Dick, and he is like this really sweet, like blonde, like country boy who's like lower class than her, but he teaches her how to ride, and he's very sweet. So it's like she has a crush on like all of them, like as you go through the series, and she ends up marrying one of them, and like all this stuff happens. But it's just like the ultimate book boyfriend series because like you have like the jock guy, and you have like the sweet like nerd kind of like boyish kind of guy, and then you've got like the stable hand guy who's like the lower class like outdoorsy one. And it's just like when I think of book boyfriend, I'm like Peyton of Flambards like started this. Like you know, like I'm sure like girls in the 60s were like, oh, which one do you like the best? Are you team Mark? Are you team Will? You know, like,
oh my gosh, I love that.
Yeah, I highly recommend it because she bonds with all of them. And it's like that trope again where like she gets along with everybody, but she's like feisty, like she stands up for herself, but she learns how to ride and she loves riding, but she's still friends with the one who like Will, who hates his brother and his father because they're obsessed with riding, but she's still friends with him too, and she takes an interest in his airplanes, and then she's even friends with the stable hand, and like the others are like, oh, you know, he's just a stable hand, but she's friends with him too. And she's just like kind of like the glue because like they're like in such a man's world because it's just like them in this house with like their horses and their hounds, and they're like running the estate into the ground because they spend all these money on like these top horses and these top dogs for their hunting. And she like just like holds like the fort together because she gets along with everybody. And I don't know, it's a really good series of books. It's more written for like, you know, 12 to like 17, but I don't know, like I feel like we all like YA.
Oh yeah,
so I highly recommend
and what better than a series that gives you like all of the guys in one place?
Yeah, and you can like all of them, you can just like one of them.
Yeah.
And you know what? I'm not gonna go into it more than that because like I could go into it more and like give spoilers and be like, well, I like this one because of this, but I'll just leave it at that. Like it is the ultimate horse girl book boyfriend series like ever. Like it's really good. More people need to read it.
Yeah. It sounds great. Guys, I recommend this if you're looking for the trifecta of book boyfriends in one place.
Yes. And there's a TV show. They made it in the 70s, so it's kind of cheesy, but like it's still really good, and you can see them on screen, and they're all pretty good looking except for the guy that plays the stable hand. I don't know, maybe some people would think he's good looking. He's not really like my type, but the other two are like really good looking. You can watch it and you can be like, oh, you know, you can swoon.
Get all of the contentment and satisfaction of watching it. Yeah. Even if you don't read it, you can watch it and, you know, have TV boyfriends instead. Oh, that's so funny. I don't have any book boyfriends that came from the same book or even the same author.
Yeah, I tried to do that. Like I said, I just like couldn't even think of anybody. I was like, I guess I could put this person in, but like I didn't really like him that much. I was like, I don't feel like this is really accurate. So that's why I just picked 3, but the one series has 3 of them in. So then I was like, okay, now I have 5.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
I feel like I spent way too much time deciding because I was almost asking myself like which ones would I want to marry kind of thing. Like I was like really serious about it. Oh, okay. So my next one is by Shea.
Oh, I haven't read any. of her stuff, but like I've been meaning to. Like,
Yeah, she's really good. I will say I love her. Her plots are always interesting, and she always has a really good sense of humor. She is lighter on the romance, and I know some people like to have more on the romantic side, and hers is a little bit lighter on the romance, like when, you know, characters kiss and stuff. Like, she describes it, but she doesn't spend paragraphs on it, and some people like a little bit more. So just bear that in mind. I appreciate them. They're really cute. I love them. Her favorite series of mine is the Elves of Lessa series, which it's super simple. There's going to be 4 books. She hasn't finished the 4th one yet, though, and each book is kind of a standalone. You should read them in order, though, because it gives spoilers away if you don't. And so each book is about a different couple. And the 3rd book, I had a hard time deciding between the 1st book and the 3rd book. I was like, oh gosh, I don't know which guy I liked better. But I decided on the 3rd book. And his name is Arvel. I think that's how I'm pronouncing correctly. And basically the story is they live in this fantasy world where at one point there were these high elves, which were like dangerous, like cutthroat kind of people. And then there were the lesser elves, which are basically created by the union between elves and humans. That's what the lesser elves are. Okay. And so the lesser elves have like the same refinement as the elves, but they're just like, they're kinder, they're softer because they were created through humans. And so the high elves have left this continent, and so now it's just the lesser elves and the humans. And there's this one city, this one country where the elves and the humans intermingle with each other. And so like every year they have like this ceremony where like they, you know, renew like their union together and stuff. And anyway, that's kind of just like a little bit of a backstory on the world. And in this particular book, the main character is the prince of the human world. And he's the youngest prince. Well, I don't want to tell you too many spoilers, but he's the youngest prince, but he's going to be king. And so all of these women, of course, are like trying to vie for his attention and stuff. And the best thing about Arvel is that he just wants to hang out in the library. He's like, leave me alone and let me read. And I'm like, yes. A man who will never question how many books you buy. That's the dream, guys. Yeah. And the main girl is an elf, and she works as a translator for the elves because they speak different languages, and most humans can't really learn to speak Elvish very well. And so this one elf, her name is Myth, she can speak both human and Elvish, and so she translates for everybody, and she becomes the prince's translator. And just their relationship is so cute because she's like very straight-laced and does everything by the book. And she's like, you know, she wears her hair in the same style every day, you know, has her uniform just so every day. She loves books, like adores books so much. And that's like the bonding thing between the two of them is how much they love like history and reading and everything. But he gets kind of a kick out of how much he can like rile her because she's just so straight laced. And like every time he like flirts with her or something, she's like, what are you doing? Like, I'm your translator. You're not supposed to flirt with me. And he just gets like a kick out of it, like pushes it more and more. So they're just so cute. And he's kind of on the quieter side in the sense that he's not like a party boy or like, you know, super, super chatty. And he's not a bad boy. He's a really, really sweet character. But just like the slight snarkiness and sarcasm he has and like trying to push her just a little bit all the time, but just still being like the sweet boy who loves books and everything. Like I adore him. Like I thought I loved the main guy in the first book, which I do, but he's like a much more like stereotypical strong silent type. And I just love like the little bit of like humor from Arvel is like perfect. I'm like, okay, this is like the balance right there, right in between. So yeah, I highly recommend that series. I highly recommend K.M. Shea, and that is my favorite one of her series, that book.
Cool. Yeah, I really need to read her book, so maybe I'll start with that series.
I would recommend it because like her other series are great. And like she has a lot of urban fantasy, which she has a new one that just came out, which I loved, but those are like a lot more complicated. And like there are a series where like it ends on cliffhangers and you have to pick up on the last one kind of thing. And I think with the Elves of Lessa series, it's just, I don't know what I think she said it's her most popular series and she can't figure out why, because it's like the least complicated, but people just love it because they're just so sweet, but then they have the fantasy aspect, but they're not like, you know, these really big, heavy topics or anything. They're just, I don't know. I just love them. They're ones that I will pick up and reread whenever I can't find anything else I want to read.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's kind of, I mean, I will read like a heavy fantasy every once in a while, like Mistborn.
Yeah.
You know, and it
Yeah.
was great, but it's like the majority of my reading is like romance or like fantasy romance, where it's like lighter on like, you know, you have to learn a whole culture and like world building and magic system and like, you know, and I'll do that, but like I don't read it like often. It's like those are my special treat kind of books where I really like delve into it.
Yeah.
You know?
I think because it takes so much emotion to read those kinds of books. Like, it kind of drains you a little bit because a lot of the time those narratives, there's also a lot more like dark stuff or sad stuff happening. So it kind of drains you to read it, like the Aragon series. I'll read those like once a year, once every other year, but those aren't the types of books I read all the time because they don't fuel me in the same way that something lighter does. Something lighter, I'm like, oh, I read it and I'm like, I get a smile on my face. I'm like, oh, that was so sweet. I loved that. Ready for the next one, you know? Which I like that feeling when I'm reading.
Yeah, I agree. So why don't you go next? Because like I said, I have one more. So you should do another one and then I'll do mine.
Okay. Now, I think I kind of unintentionally might have gone somewhat in order because these are my last two and they're my two favorites. I'm going to leave the last for best though, and it shouldn't surprise anybody when I actually say what it is. But the second to last one is by Camille Peters, and it's the second book in her original series. It's called Spelled. And that one, that series is a series of standalones, and they're all based on fairy tales. So like the first one I think was based on The Princess and the Pea, I think. But what I like a lot about her fairy tale retellings is that a lot of fairy tale retellings are very like literal, like they take the original story and kind of make tweaks to it, versus what she does is she kind of takes the original like theme or concept and then she creates something that's like you can vaguely tell is based on this fairy tale, but it's so different, which I really like, because then you don't know exactly what's going to happen. And they're fairly like thicker books, but she spends a lot of time, they're very character-driven stories. And my favorite thing about those books is you never have the miscommunication trope. Which makes me so happy. Like when the characters have like this issue of, oh, we can't be together or something is wrong. They're like, well, let's just talk it out and figure it out. And I'm like, yes, thank you. So like there's conflict, but it works out better. So anyway, I just love those. But the second one, a lot of people actually have said they don't like, which I kind of understand because it's about the main character, Rosie. Her best friend has just gotten married to the prince, and so she's at the castle with her best friend, and Rosie is. Can you hear my dogs, by the way?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I think Amazon might be here. They're just. Yep. They're fighting, so somebody must be delivering something.
Oh my God.
I was just gonna like give them a second to stop because they're just so ridiculous. Oh my gosh.
I mean, they're still like in the background. Like they're not overpowering your voice. So if people don't mind a little like dog ambiance in the background. Like,
totally goes with the vibe.
Yeah.
So anyway, Rosie is a very kind of eccentric character. Like she loves to tell stories and she wants to be the princess in every version of the story. And she also likes to fib sometimes. And she's very dramatic and like very like flamboyant and stuff, but she's really sweet. I love her character because I think I love that the growth from the beginning versus where she ends up, I really appreciate, which a lot of people I guess just found her annoying, which I was like, what? I loved this story. And the best part of this story is that during her time at the palace, her best friend, who's now the princess, one of her main guards is named Alistair. And he is the, of course, quiet, strong, silent type guard. And he constantly is like watching Rosie, like, what are you doing? Because she's constantly getting into trouble all the time. And the best thing about Alistair is like, Rosie's constantly doing stuff she shouldn't be doing and getting herself into a lot of trouble. And Alistair is just like, he has a way of like watching over her and like advising her not to do it. but not belittling her for being so dramatic or getting herself into trouble. He's always just like, I'm not letting you do this by yourself. Like, I'm coming with you kind of thing. So he's a very sweet kind of character, very much on the quiet side, but he's just so like understanding of her, and like he loves her for being this really vibrant, intense person, which I think is so sweet, because a lot of the time, like, you know, the guy would act like, oh, you need to calm down. And he's like, no, I like that about you, which is super sweet. So that's like one of my favorite stories of romance, and that is just so cute.
Wait, okay, so but I have to know more about Alistair though. Like, like I love his name. So like
yes. Well, like she likes to tell stories and like make up lots of fantastical stories about different things, like as if they were true. Like she'll like be walking in a room and like make up a story about this room, like what happened here or whatever, and he just goes along with it and like asks questions as if it were a true story, knowing that she's making it up, which I think is super sweet. And like throughout the story she gets herself constantly into trouble, and I mean he's kind of like, Rosie, would you please stop getting into trouble because I'm worried you're actually going to hurt yourself. But he's also just like following along, like, okay, what are we doing kind of thing. Like he kind of humors her, which I really like. I think the reason I like that is because that's one of the qualities I want in a man, is like, listen, I know I'm eccentric, but just humor me, okay?
Yeah.
That's what he does for Rosie, which is really sweet. So yeah, they have a really sweet romance, and she likes, I think for her in the beginning of the story, it's really hard to think of Alistair as any kind of romantic option because A, she wants to be a princess and he's a guard. So like, what fun is that? And B, he's just so stoic and so serious all the time. And so she's like, oh, well, he's not going to be any fun. When in reality, like the guys that she thinks will be more fun, they want to be like the center of attention. And Alistair is like, he just thinks she's great and he wants to hear more of her stories and like let her shine and stuff, which I think is just adorable. I just love him.
Aww.
He's a sweetie.
I love when it's like, you know, because he's a guard. And like I like princes and all, but like I like when it's like, you know, someone random. Like I really like 12 Dancing Princesses, because it's like the soldier, you know, he manages to complete the quest, and like he gets to marry a princess, and I don't know, it's just like different.
And there's a different attitude because there's like no entitlement or anything to a soldier. You're just like, you know, full of like responsibility and whatnot, which is perfect for like the more like strong, silent type of guy. Yeah,
because I feel like princes a lot of times are like the bad boy, like kind of lazy type, because like they've been like spoiled, so they're like,
yeah, I agree.
Yeah, but my last one, so this is really embarrassing, but like I don't even remember his name.
Oh no, poor guy.
I just like remember, I was just trying to think of like, you know, like what's been like really influential on me, and it was this book by Georgette that I read when I was like 14, 15 years old, and I think she was about the same age when she wrote it. So if I went back and read it now, I might not like it, but like I loved it. And she published it when she was 19. It was her first book. Like I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with Georgette. She writes Regency romance, and so her first one was called The Black Moth. And you know, it's Regency romance, and I read it so long ago, I don't remember the names of the hero and heroine. But what I remember about the hero is, so it's set in like the late 18th century. So it's like when people had like the tri-corner hats and like the breeches, and like men had like very elaborate like clothes that they wore. So he's like a dandy. So he's like, you know, like oiling his nails, and like he's always making sure his like cravat is like tied perfectly. And it was like really influential for me because he was like very particular about how he looked, but he was still like a hero, because like at the end of the book, you know, like he does all this hero stuff, but it was almost like he used a lot of times he would use that like dandy thing to like kind of like put people off, which I think that's like the trope of like the Scarlet Pimpernel, is, you know, like you have all these dandies and like everybody thinks they're so concerned about fashion, but they're really like being spies, like, you know, and they're just going on tour. And like, so I guess it was like the first time I'd ever read a book where like the hero was like interested in like this kind of stuff, and he actually was. He wasn't really putting it on. He really did care about like how he looked. He was like interested in like stuff that we would normally think is like feminine, because like he's like you know, polishing his nails and like doing but he was still so like super masculine. And so I think for me as like a 15-year-old, that was very compelling to me, because I felt like a lot of times when I've read these heroes, they were cardboard. And it's like I couldn't like really fall in love with them because they didn't feel like a whole person. But here was this hero who he's very complex. He was interested in all these certain things, and he had a personality. He was still heroic. Like he was still your traditional like hero who saves the girl at the end of the day kind of person. But I don't know, he just like had this complexity, like he cared about his nails. Like you know? So yeah, if you haven't read The Black Moth, you know, especially if you are a Georgette Heyer fan and you haven't read it, I recommend it, because it's just interesting to see what authors write as teenagers. Although it might not be good, like from an adult perspective, because I know that was my issue with Wuthering Heights, is I loved it when I was a teenager, and I read it again when I was older, and I was like, man, this reads like teenage fan fiction, and it really does. Like Wuthering Heights reminds me a lot of like, you know, like something that you might read on Wattpad, which makes sense because, you know, she was a teenager when she wrote it, and just like the way like all the characters are super young and there's lots of drama, like everybody's related. Like it reminds me of how I wrote at that age. It's just cool to see, like, even back in like the 1800s, teenagers like wrote,
they were the same.
Teenagers, you know. So yeah, I put the Black Moth, the hero, there on there, because I feel like, you know, if we're going with like really influential things, like that was a very influential hero. That was the first time I was like, wow, like I really like this guy, you know, and it just didn't feel cardboard to me. And it made me rethink of like how I could rewrite my own heroes and make them like more complex, and like maybe make them interested in something that you wouldn't normally expect them to be interested in.
I agree, like kind of breaking the stereotypical mold, because guys, kind of like when I used to think that there wasn't enough variation in female heroes, like personality wise, which is true for guys too. Like there's only like a few stereotypes they're supposed to fit into, and it's like, but real guys aren't like that. Like there's different, you know, variations of people, of what they're interested in and what they're like. I remember when I first started writing the Legends of Avalon series, initially, and it didn't work out just because Daphne's character, it didn't really work for her, but initially Desmond was going to be a nerd, like a major bookish nerd who like wore glasses, had awkward times in conversation, and like didn't know how to socialize and all these things. And then it just didn't, once Daphne came into like clarity for me, I was like, well, I think she needs like a firmer hand. But I still would love to write a hero like that, because I mean, everybody's so different, and also like what each woman finds attractive is different too, like what personality traits or what things that they're interested in, you know. So it's nice to see variation in guys in books, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. And that's why book boyfriends is so fun, because like everybody has different ones, because everybody's attracted to different things. It's just so fun to have the conversations about
And I feel like there's a whole different list of guys I would pick if I was talking about like just like my favorite men. Like not ones that I would date or marry if they were real, but just like my favorite men in books would be different. Like not like attraction wise, but just like I really loved this character kind of thing. It would be a different story for sure.
Yeah, that's true too. Definitely for me as well.
Okay, my last one.
Top favorite.
I feel like it might not be what you anticipate, but I don't think it should be a surprise to anybody once I say it. My top favorite book boyfriend, and this is hard because technically he would be my favorite movie boyfriend too, because there's a book and a movie. But he's my favorite boyfriend ever. Like if he were real, I would be married right now. Every man has to live up to this standard. Sorry to my future husband, but your standard is high. It's Aragorn from Lord of the Rings. He is just like, I don't even know if I need to explain it, but I'm going to explain it anyway. I mean, I think we've all either read or watched or know something pop culturally about Lord of the Rings, but Aragorn's character just like when I didn't watch it until I was in 8th grade, because we read The Hobbit in school, and at that time the Hobbit movies didn't exist. So we watched the third Lord of the Rings movie, and so my friends and I did a marathon watching the first two at my house because I had never seen them before, and I was in love from the get-go. And then when I eventually read the books, I was in love even more, because I think that for me, my favorite part about Aragorn, which I feel like we don't find a lot in fiction now, which I feel like is really disappointing, is that Aragorn, no matter what the cost to himself, will always do the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no matter what, when push comes to shove, he will always do the right thing, no matter what it means for him, which I just really, really like the integrity of that. Like, he doesn't care who you are. Like, you could be technically lesser than him, and he's going to treat you as if you're better. And, like, you know, like, when he's offered the ring, and he's like, no, I don't want it. Like, the integrity there is just so powerful. And I remember reading one time somebody said that Boromir was how most men are, because we're corrupt and we, you know, are fallible, but Aragorn is who we should be, because just the integrity there of, like, always doing the right thing, always sticking up for people, always making the hard call. Like, I just have so much respect for that character. And I wish that we saw more of that, because now I feel like there's so much, it's romanticized about kind of the morally gray hero.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I can appreciate a morally gray character and think that their growth is interesting or think that they're funny or whatever. But as far as romantic interests, I'm just like, I would rather be with somebody who always does the right thing than someone who justifies bad things, you know? And I just wish we saw more of that now in fiction, of having the character who is willing to make the sacrifice to do the right thing. And I find, to be completely, I don't know how PG we're supposed to keep this, but to be honest, I find that so sexy. I'm just like, oh, the guy who will do the right thing. Like, yes, please. I want more of that.
No, I totally agree. And I feel like that's why, like, I don't know, a lot of heroes in books these days just don't do it for me, because they're not larger than life enough.
Yeah.
You know? Like, they need to be like that over the top hero. And, like, obviously it's unrealistic, but, like, we don't read for realism. We read to be inspired and everything. And I tend to gravitate towards, like, the older books, because they have, like, those really over the top heroic guys. I actually feel like I have more, like, when we get to like a movie boyfriend episode, like, I'll definitely have way more, because a lot of them don't even come from, you know, women's romance stuff. It's like action stuff that I watched with my dad, and, like, those men are like my boyfriend. Like, they're just not, like, manly enough a lot of times, I feel like. And a lot of romance novels, it's just, I don't know.
I agree. And especially, like, when the characters are supposed to be older, and yet there's still these people who are, like, constantly doing the wrong thing, or, you know, what makes me so mad is when they don't make the effort to get the girl, or, like, they had to be talked into getting the girl, and I'm like, man up, bro. Come on.
No, I've never found that, like, attractive either. This is like, I'm not saying, like, they can't have doubts, but, like, I prefer it to be like, you know, they doubt it and they're like, they work it out, you know, like, nobody has to talk them into it. You know, maybe they have doubts, but if ultimately they're like, okay, no, I need to do this. Like, you know, I've won all these battles, like, I can do this, kind of a thing.
Yeah. I think, like, the big, like, classic story heroes, like King Arthur and people like Aragorn, who are, like you said, larger than life. Like, these very, like, big time heroes. I love that stuff. Like Captain America, he was my favorite superhero because, like, okay, the moment when she asks him why he doesn't dance or whatever, and he says he's waiting for the right partner, I just died. I was like, oh, the sincerity, I just love it. But also, like, that integrity of, I'm gonna do what's right because it's right, versus I'm gonna do whatever's convenient for me, kind of thing. I just, I miss that.
It's like the honor. Like, I think that to me is, like, the most attractive quality in, like, a man is like honor. You know, and that's you generally bigger in, like, the military heroes or whatever. And I think that's just, like, why I'm attracted to that more. But you reminded me, okay, so Aragorn, in the movie, like, the actor who plays him in the Lord of the Rings movie is the actor that I've always thought should have played Sirius Black in the Harry Potter movies. And then that reminds me, I had a big crush on him when I was younger.
Oh my gosh.
I was like, because the movie one has like brown hair, and Sirius Black is supposed to have
Yeah,
black hair. Everybody knows that. And he's
that's
supposed to be
true.
handsome.
Yes.
Like, I get he's been out of prison, but like they should have made him a little more
Yeah.
attractive because, like, you know, like little like 14-year-old me, like I loved Sirius because like he was handsome and he's like the bad guy, but then like or the bad boy, like he's younger. And then he became a hero and like he went through prison and then like he's like Harry's father figure and
Yes.
so I guess I do have one more and it's probably Sirius Black.
Yeah.
So when I got older, I couldn't decide between him or like his younger brother. Cause like he's like the smaller, like younger brother, and he's like
Yeah.
more like the quiet hero, like good
Mhm.
guy. So there's always like that like
Yeah.
dichotomy.
I agree. I always have a soft spot for the redemption story. Like when a guy starts out as like a bad boy, but then by the end of the series or the story of the movie, he's the one making the right calls. I'm like, oh, because they usually, I think what I love is they retain like their like snarkiness or their like attitude. And I'm like, yes, I love this. But I'm like, I don't want you in your beginning phases when you're not a great person. I want to see like the growth of you becoming the hero.
Yeah, and they become the hero, but they're still like they still have like that like toughness or the snarkiness or whatever like that made them like a good villain because they're always like winning their battles, and then they're still like that competent, that like aggressive, like they're still all those things, but they're now like on the right path, like, you know, they just did like the 180, but they bring all that like toughness, like, and they shifted to the good side. Like that is super compelling for me too.
Oh yes.
Hero.
Now I can't stop picturing Viggo Mortensen playing Sirius Black. Like that would have been so good.
It would have been really good.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I'd never even thought about it, but yeah, that would have been perfect. And he could have kept the same hairstyle from Lord of the Rings too.
Exactly. Like he's perfect. He's like the Sirius we all imagined as we were reading the book. Or like even like I don't know, I just feel like they could have found someone better. Because like I said, the actor they had, like he had brown hair. Like I think that was my biggest sticking point.
Especially when you've read a book and loved it, it seems like you can't even like when the casting directors can't get like the details of the physical part right. It's like, are you serious? You guys have millions of dollars. Dye the hair the right color.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy. Like I guess they want to have like the right feel and the right personality, but to me that actor didn't. He was too like timid. Like he looked like your next door neighbor to me. Yeah. Like I was like, he needs to be a little more exciting. But
see, I don't think I had a reaction to it when I watched it because I didn't read them as a kid because we weren't allowed to.
Yeah.
It wasn't until later in life that my mom was like, I don't know why I told you couldn't, because I don't think they're a bad thing at all. But, you know, back then everyone was like, oh, witchcraft, you can't read it. So I didn't have, when I watched the movies, I had never read the books before. I read the books after seeing the movies.
Okay. Yeah, because I read the books. My mom didn't let me until I was older because she was like, okay, it starts when he's 11. You know, and it's lighthearted, but like it goes up and then the books get darker. So she's like, she didn't want me to start reading them too young because she didn't want to be like, okay, you have to stop the series now and wait till you're older to finish it.
Yeah.
You know, so I was like, I think I was 11 or 12 before I started reading it, and it was still coming out. You know, so like by the time I read like the 6th and 7th book, I think I was like maybe 15. So I was old enough at that point.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I wonder too, is like the director was not thinking of it from the stance, like casting wise, of like, you know, a 14-year-old girl. He was probably like, oh, Sirius Black. He wasn't probably even thinking that this is like a handsome romantic character. Like, you know what I mean?
That's true.
Like, that's probably what happened.
He's like, he's not actually a love interest for anybody, so it doesn't really matter what he looks like. It's probably what they were thinking. Yeah. They should have asked all the girls though.
They should have.
Oh, our fictional boyfriends.
I know. Yeah, but now I'm excited to do like movie ones will be great.
Yes.
Like, and even talking about, because I feel like my real book boyfriends are the ones that I wrote. Like
I have such a hard time not including my own.
I know. Like I'm super in love with like all the ones that I wrote, like those men, because you know, it's like exactly to my taste kind of a thing.
Exactly. It's a wish fulfillment. So it's like, of course, those are my favorites.
Yeah.
Same.
Yeah, so I'm excited for those episodes. Those will be good. But I feel like this is a great way to like kick off like the new year, the podcast. It's a good boyfriend discussion. Like, you can't go wrong. Everybody loves it.
Oh yeah. I mean, plus we're giving you guys some great reads to start out 2023 with. So there's that too.
Yes. Yeah. And then definitely like let us know, like, you know, if you have some great book boyfriends that we might know about them, but like maybe we don't, like, you know, give us suggestions. Like,
Yes,
I'm always
please.
looking for more stuff to read. And like, yeah, so let us know, like, your favorite ones, like who we should be reading.
Agreed. Please do, because finding new reads for the new year. Like, I know I have a long TBR, but like if you have recommendations on good book boyfriends, then I'll read those first.
Exactly. And like, I feel like I'm always in the mood for that. Because, you know, my TBR has a lot of stuff that I might not necessarily be in the mood for.
Yeah.
So.
Same. All right, guys. Well, thank you all for listening and or watching.
Yeah, we'll see you next time.
Yeah. Bye, guys.
Bye.